Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Caleb with DevSlopes, and in this video we're going to continue learning about protocols, and we're going to build a little app that's going to allow us to use mutating functions within protocols, and we're going to use it to modify some values. It's going to be really cool. It's just another thing we can do with protocols. So let's get started. Go ahead and pull open Xcode, and you should get this little view here. Click on Create New Xcode Project. And we're going to go ahead and just create a single view app, and we're going to name this Eluxon. Okay, it's going to be an app having to do with light. So go ahead and click Next, and we're going to save this in Protocols and Delegates, like so. Boom. There we go. So go ahead and pull this open in full screen if it'll let me. There we go. And we're going to start by building the UI really quickly. It's a super simple interface. Just click on the background view, set the background to be dark gray. We're going to drag on a UI label, and then we're going to drag in some assets to work for to use as button graphics. So go ahead and type UI label, and go ahead and drag this onto the screen and center it like so. We're going to change the font to custom, the family to Avenir Next, and we're going to set the style to be heavy. Okay, and we're going to bump this all the way up to like size 100. It's going to be really big, and of course with that in mind we need to resize this whole thing like so. Okay, and stretch it so that it's a little wider. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to write the word off. Okay, and you know what, just for fun, let's put in some emojis here. Let's put in the moon, but we're going to make it dark so that it is like a, not a full moon, but whatever a dark moon is. And we're actually going to need to reduce this, I guess, to size 80 perhaps. That might help, maybe 70. Okay, looks like 70 is good. And we're going to go ahead and center that again and change the font color to be white, just like so. Now, we're going to go ahead and pin this to, or not pin this, but align this horizontally and vertically, like so, by selecting the item and then pinning it horizontally and vertically in the container. And now we're going to go ahead and add a UI button, like so, and we're going to just drop it right there. Now, at this point, we actually do need to use some assets, so we're going to go ahead and pull in some graphics, and we're going to use these to set the values for our off and on button. So click on assets.xc assets, and then you can actually drag in these assets. If you don't have these, you can download them by tapping on the little download source code button, and the assets will be downloaded. You can airdrop them to your Mac if you're on your iPhone, or if you're on your Mac, they just download to your downloads folder. So now we have an on button and an off button, which is really cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the storyboard, and we're going to set this button to not have a text value. So delete that, but we are going to set it to be off button, because that's the white one with the shadow. Now we're going to need to resize this, so go ahead and give it a height and width constraint of 50 and 50, like so. But of course it's not going to do anything until we pin it horizontally in the container. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to pin it, we're going to pin it 100 from the bottom, like so. And then it makes it a nice square, perfectly circular button, which is cool. So that's too small for my liking, so I'm actually going to change this to be 100 by 100. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now all we need to do is to connect the button and the label to our view controller. So go ahead and open the assistant editor, and we're going to go ahead and make some room here, and I'm going to connect these to this view controller. Get rid of the boilerplate stuff. We don't need it. And yeah, let's go ahead and do this. So from the label, right-click and drag, and we're going to call this on-off label, like so. And we're going to right-click and drag from the button and put it below View Did Load, change the connection to action, and we're going to call this toggle button was pressed. And basically what this is going to do, when we tap this button, we're going to set the view to be white, we're going to change the font color to be black, and change these emojis to actually be the full moon. It's basically sort of like a flashlight app, but we're going to use a protocol and a mutating function to change this value. It's really, really cool, actually. So now that our interface is finished, we are going to, oh, you know what? No, sorry. If we're going to change what the button looks like, we need an outlet for the button as well. So right click and drag and create an outlet called toggle button. Perfect. Okay, so now that our interface is done, we're actually going to go ahead and reopen these editors on the side. We're going to close the assistant editor and go into our view controller. So we are going to basically think what we need to do here. When I toggle that button, we're going to need to change the background to white. We're going to need to change the font color to dark gray. We're going to need to replace those emojis with full moons instead of the dark moon, and then change the button image as well. So there's a lot of things we got to do, but I think a great way to manage this would be to use an enumeration. Okay, so we're going to right click and create a new group. We're going to call it enums. While we're at it, we might as well create a new group for our protocols. So just create a protocols group as well. And then rearrange those. Whoops. We don't want it to be in the folder. We want it to be outside the folder. That's fine. Okay, so anyway, go ahead and right-click on the enums folder. Click New File. And we're going to create an enumeration. So I clicked on Swift File. And this enumeration is basically going to help us to monitor the on status or the off status of the button. So I'm going to call it switch status. Press enter. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an enumeration with two different cases. Okay, one for on and one for off. So do that now by typing enum switch status case on, and then we're going to type case on. And we actually don't need to do two separate lines. We can just type comma off. And that creates two separate cases for us, which is really neat. But what I said was that we would be using mutating functions. And we're going to actually create our protocol now so that I can explain that to you. So go ahead and right-click on the protocols group, click New File, and click Swift File. We're going to name this toggleable. And this is another convention, another naming convention for protocols. If this protocol kind of only handles one type of behavior, like toggling something, you can just name the protocol toggleable, and then when we conform to this, we are basically making something toggleable, able to be toggled on or off. So go ahead and click Create, and we're going to name our protocol here like so, protocol toggleable, and we're going to write one function, func toggle. Okay? Now, of course, there's no implementation code here. When we call toggle somewhere else, we're going to basically say, hey, whatever class or structure or enumeration we conform to toggleable in, we'll be able to call toggle and set up the implementation that way. Now, I did say, though, that we're using a mutating function, so we need to call that here, mutating. And a mutating function, whatever variable we call toggle on, we're actually going to change the value of that variable. And that's where our enumeration comes into play. So with our protocol toggleable here, go back to switch status. And what we're going to do is we're going to conform to our protocol in this enumeration. So go ahead and do that by typing a colon. And we're going to make switch status toggleable. We're going to give it the capability to be toggled. But of course, it's going to yell at us saying that we don't yet conform to this protocol. How do we conform to it? By implementing the mutating function toggle. So let's go ahead and do that beneath our cases here by typing toggle. And you'll notice that the function toggle comes in here, but remember, we want it to be mutating, so we need to declare mutating. Now, what we're going to do is we're basically going to write a statement saying if the current case is on, it's going to be flipped to off when we call toggle. If it's off, we're going to flip it to on. So to do this, we're going to actually use a switch statement. And since this is an enumeration of type switch status, when we use self, that's going to refer to whatever instance of switch status we use. So we can type switch self, and if you have not yet used switch statements, they're basically like if-else or if-else-if statements that allow us to switch through a bunch of different cases. And since our switch status only has 2 values, we could technically use an if-else statement, but I find that a switch statement can be a little more descriptive. So let's say that we have 2 separate cases for our switch, which we do. Case 1 is on, okay? And in a switch statement, you need to put a colon at the end. Then we're going to do something, okay? But what if we are off? So case off, put a colon, and we're going to do something else. Okay, that's how a switch statement works. If the value comes in as on, we're going to do something. Otherwise, if the value comes in as off, we'll do that thing. Now, like I said, this is a mutating function called toggle. So if the value of this switch status comes in as on, what we're going to do is we're going to set self, meaning the switch status, we're going to set self to be equal to off. This mutating function is actually going to be able to set the value of whatever instance of switch status we have. The same thing goes for case.off. We're going to set self to be equal to .on. This mutating function allows us to change the value of any instance of switch status, which is really, really cool. So we conformed to a protocol within our enumeration, and now watch what we can do. We can go into our view controller, like so, and what we can do is we can create an instance of switch status and set it with a default value. So in our interface builder, let's think, what status is this currently? Off. So if I want to set it to be off by default, I can go like this, var switch status of type switch status, and we're going to set it to be equal to off. Okay? So we're setting a default value. When switch status is created, it is set to be off by default. That is going to be really helpful for us because what we're going to do is we are basically going to toggle it. Okay, remember switch status. If I go look at the definition of switch status, if I call switch status.toggle, it's basically going to take that off value and it's going to flip it to be on. If it's on, it'll flip it to be off. So when the toggle button is pressed, we're going to go ahead and call switch status.toggle. Pretty easy, right? And that's going to toggle the value. So it starts out as off, and we toggle it when we press the button. That makes sense, right? Just like a light switch or a push button. So now we're going to go ahead and use an if-else statement to check if it's off, and we're going to do something. And if it's not off, meaning on, we're going to do something else. So if switch status is equal to off, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the image to be our off button, which if you look at the assets here, our off button is the white one, like so, and the on button is the black one. So we're going to go ahead and type, if switch status is off, we're going to set toggle button dot set image, and we're going to call UI image named, and we can type off button. Okay, now when you use UI image this way, you need to force unwrap it. But that's going to set the image to be the off image if it is off. That's what we want. Now to get this to work, you need to set the UI control state to be normal. And that way we can actually change the image. Pretty cool. Then what we need to do is we need to think the background color in our interface builder is gray when it's off. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to go ahead and do view.background color, and I'm going to use a color literal. And these are the coolest things. You can actually click on it and you can set whatever color you want. There's my dark gray background color. So I'm going to set the background to be that color literal. Next up, we're going to need to set the status label to say off and have the 2 dark moons. So go ahead and say on-off label dot text equals, and we're going to pass in those 2 dark moons, which I can access here. I'm going to copy and paste it, and I'm going to say off, just like that. That's how we did it in the interface builder. So that is set, and now I need to change the text color to be white. So on-off label dot text color, and I can use a color literal again. Of course, I want it to be white. So that's great. If the switch is off, it's going to set the off image for the button. It's going to set the background color, the text, and the text color. else, okay, we need to set the toggle button dot set image, and we're going to use UI image named, named, and we need to set the on button like so. Force unwrap it, and then we're going to set the control state to be normal. That way we can set the image of the button. Next, we're going to set the view.background color to be a color literal. And if it is on, we want the background to be white, but that makes our text invisible. So let's go ahead and let's change the text color, and let's change what the text says. Let's start with the text. On/off label dot text equals, and we're going to say on. Okay? And just for fun, I'm going to put in my nice glowing moon here. Pretty cool. And there we go. So that's on. But the font color is still white, so the words would be disappearing. So let's go ahead and set on/off label dot text color, and we're going to set it to be a color literal, and we're going to choose the dark gray color like the background. Very, very cool. This is actually all we need to do. Thanks to our protocol and thanks to our mutating function, we can set our switch status to have an inherent value of off, and then we can toggle it every time we press the button. It's going to actually change the value of our variable. That's the really cool thing with mutating functions. So let's go build this to a simulator, and let's see how we did. We're going to build it, and let's just test it out really quickly. We should be able to toggle the values to flip this on and flip this off. And if you really wanted to dive into this, you could wire up the flash on the camera to turn on and off whenever you toggle the button. That's something you could do. I'm not saying you will, but you definitely could. So let's check out our sim here and see how we did. All right, it appears to be loading, taking its sweet time. Okay, so here we are. It says off. We have the dark moons, the light button. When I click it, watch what happens. It toggles on. The background becomes white. The moons change, the words change, and the springboard quit. Thanks, springboard. Good old Xcode beta bugs. And the button changes as well. Let's toggle it off. So cool. So our mutating function is able to change the values as we want. Super, super cool, guys. This has been a little intro to protocols and delegates. I hope that you now feel confident using them, or at least thinking of ways that you could use them in your apps, whether you're setting up a specific type of functionality, whether you are passing data using the delegate method, or even using mutating functions to modify values. There's lots of ways protocols can benefit us. So I hope you've enjoyed this little intro to protocols, and we're going to head over to the next video now.